Well, welcome to the two badass women of color who made history on election day here in Seattle. Welcome to Hamdi Mohamed and Toshiko Hasegawa. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me say right off the top here, congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
congratulations to both of
yeah.
you.
So, how does it feel? I guess we're a little bit after the election here now, but has it really hit that you won, Toshiko?
Oh man, I feel good. Oh, I feel so good. Campaigning's hard, and being on the other side is just sort of, sitting with the gravity of the work that's ahead, and it's a lot, but we're equipped. And I wasn't sent into this situation alone. We had a lot of people walking with us along the way. And so we feel ready, on top of it.
Yeah,
So it feels good.
Hamdi.
Yeah, it feels wonderful to be done campaigning. I was saying to someone, they call it running for office for a reason. You are never walking. Um, you're constantly on the go and running around and trying to talk to as many voters as possible in such a short window. But it's been a wonderful experience. You know, our communities are so excited. We've made history together.
Right.
It's been a great experience and an honor to run alongside Toshiko and now to be colleagues on the Port Commission.
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to the future.
It's crazy because, I mean, the port commission is generally, you think of it as a bunch of old white guys, right? And then overnight, it's a majority minority commission. I mean, that's stunning. And I think a lot of white people are going like, holy shit, what just happened? And it's a positive thing, but I think it took people by surprise because the incumbents were kind of like the establishment, right? And they didn't even feel like needed to run a campaign. And when they got hit with you guys, it was amazing to watch.
Yeah, I think what the most deadly mistake the incumbent made was underestimating me out the gate. And so they knew that we were coming, and you have 2 weeks to fundraise before you officially file. And we, made all the phone calls. We raised $25,000 from the jump. And then about a month after we announced, he had a conversation with one of the sitting commissioners, and and the incumbent goes, "Oh, we're just getting warmed up."
Oh,
And he
geez.
replied, "She's already around the rink. You should probably start running." But that's part of the hubris. And it was said that this deeply entrenched, deeply respected incumbent was untouchable. And so there's a little bit of, audacity, a lot of audacity on our behalf too, to challenge that status quo and bring something beyond business as usual. And the response was tremendous. There was clearly an appetite for change.
Yeah.
Hamdi, did you feel the same way with the incumbent that you were challenging, Stephanie Bowman?
I definitely did feel underestimated. And, as a woman of color, I'm often underestimated. And, I've worked on campaigns in the past. I managed U.S. Congresswoman Jayapal's campaign. Today I work for our county executive. I advise on the county's $12 billion budget. And so I was bringing professional experience and lived experience, and I live in the heart of the airport community. And so for me, it really wasn't about one sort of candidate. It was ensuring that the voices of our communities were at the table, that businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19 was being centered in our campaign and in the discussion around economic recovery. And so I really wasn't paying close attention to the candidate that I was running against. I was very much focused on our campaign, similar to Toshiko, raising the dollars, making sure that, we had the foundation needed to run a successful campaign that was countywide, right? I think often people forget that the Port Commission races hit the whole county, and that's not easy.
And I will also add that underestimating us also happened by our own allies who were well-meaning, but would reduce routinely our candidacy down to our identities as women of color. And I remember when we announced KUOW covered our campaign, and really honed in on the fact that it could be for the first time, a woman of color elected to the Port Commission. And yes, but it's a dramatic oversimplification of what we bring to the table.
Yes.
And the reason why we decided to run for the Port Commission had so much more to do than a lack of ethnic or identity representation. It had everything to do with the economy, with the state of affairs, with international relations and the future of trade and commerce for our region, and the deep implications that has for all of our community members. And so we were very mindful about having thoughtful economic development platforms, reaching out intentionally to business community stakeholders, right? Making sure that we had a very thoughtfully fleshed out environmental justice and maritime plan. And folks routinely would ask, well-meaningly, what the racial justice lens is, what the social justice implications are, and it didn't do justice by the totality of what we had to offer.
Well, that's one thing that hasn't returned to like business as usual is the way campaigns are conducted. Because of social media, the blowback, the racial animosity that any candidate of color, from racial to sexism, what did you guys experience? I mean, were you prepared for that level of animus towards you guys?
I'm so grateful to have shared the campaign trail with Hamdi. Let me just say that. Like, I know we're already pulling up some of the incidents that we experienced together.
Yeah, Hamdi. I mean, what did you experience?
I like to always think that I have really, really thick skin. And, someone said to me, you won the jackpot on all of the isms out there, right? Racism, sexism, Islamophobia. And, I'm like, that's the skin I have lived in all of my life. And I've lived, most of my life in the US. I came to the US when I was 3 years old. And I experienced 9/11 as a kid, and that taught me to be tough and to love my neighbors, as well as be, honest and authentic about how I show up at the age of 11. And so during this race, I thought I was prepared for all of it. And it was hard when I started receiving hate mail, right? I received my mailer ripped up into little pieces with a nasty note.
Really? Oh.
I did, yeah. And text messages that said things like, we were text banking all across the county, saying things like, no one named Mohamed will ever get my vote. I will never vote for a foreigner. But we won our race with nearly 300,000 votes. And that just says a lot about the majority of folks who are in King County and who are caring and will not vote just simply because of my last name, but will vote based on my character and platform. And so it was a humbling experience that sometimes made me, really sad. And at other times I celebrated.
Yeah.
So Hamdi, did people in your community, I know they supported you, yes, but were they concerned about you, particularly with your last name, which seems to be this, draws people that want to attack?
Yeah, I had actually, before I decided to run, I talked to a lot of my community elders, and, a number of my elders asked me to run years ago. And some of the things that would come up is my last name, this last name, Mohamed. And, folks have told me, I should drop the AMED out of my last name and just run as Mo with just MOH. And to me, my last name has a lot of meaning. I'm a person that's grounded in faith. And I believe that the majority of folks are good people, right? There's more good people in the world than there is bad. And, I always try to live as honest as possible and to be my full self and show up as my full self. And my name is that. It has a lot of meaning to me. And so I didn't change it. And I know my elders who told me those things, right, who said, drop a few letters in your last name. That's coming from a place of love. Right. That's coming from a place of their own fear and wanting to protect me. But, you know, we are bold and courageous people as people of color. And I'm so honored to have been able to win with my actual name.
Yeah. So Toshiko, so what did the trolls hit you with on the campaign trail?
Especially since you were running during a time of this active anti-Asian hate going on in the country.
Yeah, and actually 3 days after we announced there was that national tragedy in Atlanta that targeted Asian women for violence, and that's, you know, 2 days as a candidate, and the inbox started filling with, you know, there isn't a racial issue in America. You know, my wife is Asian and everything here is fine. And it's like, God, I feel bad for your wife, you know? And really what it does is it just informs you as to like, this is the exact right thing that I need to be doing. And you know, there's really not a lot of latitude for people like us to be able to be in decision-making capacities. And you know, and the Port of Seattle is a historically white, historically male institution along the campaign trail. We had to be accountable to those stakeholders. And so they would hold candidate forums, they would hold meet and greets. And I can't tell you the number of times where they either mispronounced their names or didn't even try, and they would be corrected, and they just, I can't get it right, you know, and then that became an opportunity for our opponents to be white saviors and say, it's pronounced Toshiko. You know?
Oh my God, yeah.
Her name is Hamdi, and you know, and so and thank you for that correction. And also, throughout this campaign trail, I observed how just the smallest things led to the credibility of the white incumbents. Whereas by contrast, if Hamdi or I were to talk about racial justice, you know, systemic issues, like meaningful solutions, then we would become social justice warriors or radical left-wing socialists. So there's a clear difference in the way we're allowed to approach.
So if the white opponent would mention that, then they were like, oh, they're so woke and they're just.
And I started the $10 million South King County fund that's specific for racial justice. And it's like,
oh yeah,
okay,
yeah.
You know, and that's wonderful. And anybody with a systemic lens or who understands equity knows that it's more than throwing money one time at an issue, but it's a lens that you have to bring to everything that you do. And respectfully, you know, let's think more critically about what that looks like. But centering conversations around racial justice turns us into what? Radicals. And then with a countywide perspective that Hamdi's talking about, we know we have to be able to win moderates in order to pull it off in the end. And so it became this jujitsu of how do we talk about issues in a way that's meaningful and true.
So on the campaign trail, what was the one thing for both of you that you were not prepared for? Because you've both, you know, your father's a state senator, Hamdi worked with Pramila. So you're familiar with campaigning and the politics. What weren't you guys ready for on the campaign trail that just kind of blew your mind and set you back? I said,
I know what my answer is.
Go for it.
It's the LD tours. I sorely underestimated just how
LD
hard
being
that is.
LD being legislative district.
Legislative districts, 17 of them. When you're running countywide, you are accountable to all of them, and that was questionnaires, preliminary interviews with the endorsement committees, sometimes follow-up interviews, and then appearing before the full body, which could be hundreds of people, and is always late at night. It could go to the very end because other candidates are there too, and port races don't get priority oftentimes. And then you'd have to show up again. So that's like at least 5 hours for every LD.
Right.
And
to understand that legislative districts, they usually have councils. And so I'm just trying
executive
to
committees.
Yeah. Okay.
Committees.
And are they usually just Democratic legislative district?
It's always a Democratic structure within a Democratic organization.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So you basically have to go in and make a pitch.
The meat grinder. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a worthy process. But I also, it takes a lot of just administrative prowess to keep track of all of them, make sure you did your initial, they're not all coordinating with each other. You have to know when their meeting is, you have to reach out, you have to get on their agenda, and it's a lot. It was a lot.
How about you, Hamdi?
Yeah, I agree. That was a lot of coordinating we had to do and mapping out and making sure we were at the right place at the right time. I guess in addition to that, just covering the whole county, I think that was a lot. There's 1.4 million people who live in King County, right? There's about 600,000 people who voted in our race, and trying to have a strategy to hit everyone as much as possible and talk to, as many voters as possible. That was a lot. Driving, sometimes I would drive to the east side, and then I would have to run back to an event that's happening in SeaTac, and then I would be in, Renton, and then back to Seattle. That was just a lot on my body, and we, that it's a lot of work. In port races, people are not paying attention to them as much, so they're not donating to these races, and so if you look at even just like the PDC and look at what Toshiko and I raised compared to what Executive Dow Constantine raised in his race, it's night and day, right? And so we're working with a smaller amount of dollars and trying to reach the same amount of universe. And so being really strategic on how we spent our money and where we went was a lot of work and scary at times. I was like, there's not enough dollars to put in this race or time for us to be able to win.
Did the two of you communicate during the campaign about what you were experiencing, or just, hey, someone to lean on, let's put it that way?
Absolutely. Yeah, I leaned on Toshiko a lot. I think we made, we both said this, we made the experience fun, right? For a lot of candidates when they run for office, even after they win, they're like, that was just like such a hard, terrible experience. But being able to run alongside Toshiko, there's so many times we joked and we laughed, and she got my jokes, right? Like certain jokes that, we can say and share with each other, where we just can click and understand each other so well. And there's times where there was tears involved, and I was really sad about something and how something happened, and she was there for me. And it's been an honor to be able to run alongside someone who gets you.
Oh my gosh, Hamdi just has such a light spirit, and they often tell you, like, make sure that you have somebody that you can lean on who understands what you're going through, who's also a candidate. To have somebody running specifically for port in position 3 while I'm running for position 4, and to step into those spaces made them feel safer. And I think also from a strategic standpoint, it also helped us be able to claim those spaces as belonging. If we had 1 minute to make a pitch or an intro, there's two of us with faces of women of color who are taking up space in these like otherwise very, very white rooms. The amount of outreach that we were able to do, this isn't a collaboration, right? We weren't coordinating campaigns, but by virtue of two of us running alongside each other, I think there was double the amount of bandwidth and airtime for us to be in front of people and get them comfortable with the notion of us, qualified, credible, badass women of color, stepping into a place like the port.
One of the things that's interesting about politics is the binariness of it, right? You put all this work into it. At the end, you either win or you lose. There's no second place. There's no participation trophy.
Right.
What was it like election night when when 8 o'clock rolled around and the first wave of returns? What went through your minds?
Hamdi.
Yeah. I wrote myself 2 letters before election night, and one was a letter to myself if I lost and where I would be and how I should respond to myself. And then I wrote a letter to myself if I won, and how I should be still grounded in this work and not, let it overwhelm me, or, really staying focused on what I needed to get done and what that meant. And reminding myself of all of the people that participated and helped me get to where I'm at. Because I think at times your name is on there, your name's on the ballot, it can make your head really big. And so I wrote myself a grounding letter. And so, and I prayed on it. I'm a person of faith. And so I made sure that, I spent a lot of time meditating and preparing myself for election night, that I don't get shocked in any kind of way. And when I talked to my consultants, and they said, if you're off by 3 or 4 points, you should celebrate, right? If we're off by more than 3 or 4 points, then we just got to hang tight and wait for all of the other ballots to come in. And we were short by 2 points, right, on election night. And so that was a moment of celebrating. So my consultant called me screaming, like, you should feel happy. This is great. And I was like, okay, this is great, 2 points. And I had all of those little chatters in the back of my head, right? Like, you're not running a traditional campaign. You're not running with a traditional quote unquote name, so I was like, I will not, I'm going to hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and go back to those letters that I wrote myself. And at the end, we celebrated, and win or lose, there was a lot to celebrate. I mean, we made the port sexy. People know about what the port is. Let's be honest, right? And so there was just a lot of good energy.
How about for you, Toshiko?
Well, our campaign's calculus was similar to Hamdi's. And so we knew that we needed to be within 3-4 points maximum if we were going to win, because we know that by and large, we're running to the left of the incumbents. And so some of the later returns would favor us, and we'd close whatever gap would be there. And so although on the initial drop, we were behind by less than 1%, Hamdi, as she said, by maybe 2 points, I knew that we won. And so we celebrated that night like we had won. And so my first thought was, we did it. And like just really letting that sink in. And then the second thought was, how did Hamdi do? And then knowing that she won, I wanted to call her, I wanted to scream, but we knew we'd be swept away. So we had plans to connect the following morning, first thing. Whether it was going to be a ballot chasing, by then, of the ballots are cast, we could coordinate on ballot chasing, on whatever it was. But it was just really, truly celebratory. And to see who was in the room, right? We had Sam Cho and Grimai Zahila and Joe Wynn and, Andrew Lewis, or just so many, I guess the best way to describe it is millennials who have stepped up to be part of what the future is going to look like. And there was just a lot of power and a lot of trust in that room. And it was amazing to be, it's amazing to be a part of it.
Now, Toshiko, your father is a state senator, and he has been in the political game for quite a while. So what advice did he give you, and what was his reaction as you were going through all of this?
His advice was, give him hell.
That sounds like your dad.
And his reaction was, I'm proud of you, baby.
Oh, so cool.
How about you, Hamdi? Was there anybody that you heavily relied on and got you through this?
My community, right? All of South King County, my home. I live in SeaTac, and it's been decades since South King County has had representation on the Port Commission, and they are heavily impacted by port operations. And so there was a lot of people in this particular community that was rooting for us, and allies on the east side who were like, South King County should have a seat at the table. And that was great. My parents as well. I shared a lot about my family, and I talked to both my parents about that. My mom was a SeaTac airport worker. My father was a trucker, and he got into an accident that was work related and lost 50% of his vision. And I shared that during the campaign trail, and why it's important to have healthcare and workers' rights, right? For people who work on port facilities. And so I shared a lot about my family story. And so I leaned on them a lot. And they were my trusted advisors throughout the campaign.
Wow.
So one of the things you go through that people maybe they don't think about is the fact that you give up a lot personally to do this stuff. Now, Toshiko, on your end of things, I mean, you're a mom and you have a daughter and you're breastfeeding.
Right.
I mean, tell us about that and how you juggled. I know your husband is a political guy, Michael Charles. So how did you guys work it out?
Well, I come from this perspective of being the family member of a candidate. As you mentioned, my father has run many campaigns, and before he was elected to the legislature, he, was in leadership at the Teamsters at Local 174. One of my earliest memories was of my mom waking me up in the middle of the night and saying, Daddy won the campaign. And so, I appreciate that when somebody runs, it requires something from everyone. And actually it was my husband who originally floated the idea of running for the port some years ago. It's something I've sat with and thought about deeply, and something we've contemplated as a family. And then when we decided it was the right decision, it was a decision that we made together. And what a privilege, what a blessing to be able to have that sort of confidence of the people whose opinion matters to you the very most. It wasn't just running as a mom, it was running as the mother of a newborn, which for people who understand, that requires, it was sleep regressions and bottle strikes, where I was the only person who could keep her alive. And we talk about sacrifice, and she's really the unspoken MVP of all of this. Those late nights that we were talking about at LD meetings, that's exactly why it was so hard. And the response that I get from people would be like, "Oh, is Michael babysitting tonight?" And it's like, actually, it's called fathering, But I'm grateful to be a part of a generation and have built a family where my husband has always accepted equal responsibility in rearing our beautiful child. And so it just reinforces a sense of gratitude.
Hamdi, how about on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lost for words, speechless, because I don't know how Toshiko did that. And she is an incredible woman for being able to balance all of that. And there's so many young, girls out there that you are going to inspire to be fearless, and regardless of, giving birth, that's not a deficit, right? That is something to be proud of. And so I'm just in awe of you for being able to do that. But for me, I had my own sort of challenges. I was still working full time, and I often joked around with my siblings that I haven't been the best sister this last year, because I just haven't been there for all of the conversations. I think I was leaving an LD meeting and at 9 p.m. and I was on the phone with actually Toshiko right after it, just debriefing it. And I was like, I got to run. I got to put my shoes on because my husband's birthday is happening at his mom's house.
Oh, wow.
And it's like 9 p.m. on the night of, and so there's a lot of just those family sort of, sacrifices you're making. But we did, similar to Tosh, we made a collective decision. Some of the first people who told me I should just run for office was my husband and my mother-in-law and my mom. And so just knowing that I had their support, their buy-in, and that they wanted me to do this just makes the process so much more easier, knowing that you have, love and support and people behind you that are rooting for you.
Right. You two were shining stars on election night and during the days afterwards. But there's also been a lot of talk about how candidates from the left, progressive candidates leaning toward the left, did not do so well in the Seattle area. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that there needs to be an inward look for progressive candidates about how they did and the future of running for political office from that position? Hamdi?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we are in an interesting place in Seattle's history. I canvassed a lot in Seattle and talked to voters on all sides. And there is just a lot of divide, right? There's a lot of divisiveness politics that exist. Sometimes it prevented me from just even being able to share my name and what I'm running for, right? Immediately, it's like, who's your mayor candidate? Who's your, city attorney candidate? And, often I would say, hey, I live in SeaTac. I'm not voting in those races, actually. And let me tell you about the Port of Seattle and what my candidacy is about. And so, but yeah, there is a lot of divisiveness that's happening in Seattle, and a lot of racial reckoning. And so I think this is a moment for Seattle to be able to reflect and come together. And I'm hoping that the leadership that did get elected, that, the majority of Seattle voted for, will do that, right? That they will figure out a way to bring people together to the table to strategize and work together. Because regardless if you have a progressive agenda or not, we are neighbors, and we're people that have to be able to work together, and wherever there's common ground, we're gonna have to come together and do that. And there's some serious issues that we have to address. Homelessness, right? Police accountability. Those are all issues that impact our small businesses, our community members. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the current leadership does.
One of the things I'm looking forward to is actually seeing the maps of how voters voted for us in the city of Seattle, which neighborhoods we won. We knew that we needed the city of Seattle in order to win countywide. And so we definitely did some strategic targeting in certain areas. It was always intentional. It was always a matter of battling. We knew that we would have, greater name recognition in South Seattle, that, we have greater roots there. And so to give the incumbent more airtime in those areas would work against us. So, versus, doing really strategic targeting and mailers towards North Seattle, what we did need as down ballot races was for progressive candidates to turn out the vote among progressive voters. And so to the extent that they were able to do that, I think that worked for us. And I think that the way that we cast our net and the way that we run our campaigns was something that we're very, very proud of and very, very effective. And so I'm interested to see the discrepancy in that turnout.
It's interesting. These days, there's a lot of the quote activists, right? And they're choosing not to engage because they think the system's so broken that it's that whole cancel thing. We're not going to talk to those people because we'll never change them. Both of you are activists, right? But yet you ran. What would you tell these people that have just written it off and have cocooned with their own constituencies and won't reach out and just say it's broken? You guys clearly don't believe that. But what words of wisdom would you have to say about them actually getting engaged and getting involved?
Yeah. I've always said I've made a conscious decision to work within government. Right. And I believe in our system and in our government, and recognize that there are areas that we really, really need to improve on. Right. And addressing the root causes of issues is so important, whether we're talking about police accountability or housing issues. But I made that conscious decision to work within the system and to help root out some of the issues that exist. And a lot of the times what I tell activist friends, young folks, right, when I talk to college students or high schoolers who are starting their political activism or community organizing, they're often the most frustrated by the process in the system. And I always tell them, you have to have an inside-outside strategy. You have to know when to call people out and when to call them in, and who your allies are, and be strategic in what you're trying to get done. Because, it's one thing to be upset, right? When you're upset about something, that is it's a good thing. That's how change comes, by radical movements and things like that. But if you don't have a plan and a strategy and a long game, right, then what you're actually upset about or trying to change then ends up just dying, right? And so anytime I'm talking to young folks who are interested in community organizing, I really do talk to them about being strategic and not giving up on the process and the system, because regardless if you're participating or not, you're going to be impacted. And so many people are impacted by decisions that our government and elected leaders are making. And so we can't just pay attention during presidential years, which most people pay attention to, but it is that local elections are just as important. We have to pay attention to our port and school board races, that, port commissioners manage funds that come from our property taxes. School board members, have a big say in deciding how our local taxes are spent on education, things that impact, young folks. And they have to have the ability to help put in place policies that address the systemic barriers that impact, people of color, immigrants, refugees, a lot of the issues that a lot of activists deeply care about and want to see changed. And so it's not a time to, cross your arms, but it's a time to get out there and vote and make your voice heard. So I try to inspire them and I try to push them to participate, but it's not easy. But
democracy, they say, is messy. So,
Right.
yeah. So what now? You got the job. Now you got to go do it. So what are you hoping to accomplish in those initial months that when you get on the job to kind of set your path of being a port commissioner? Toshiko.
I think when we get there, we need to set the premise that usually the Port of Seattle does a training for candidates, and they did not do that this year. And so, I look forward to meeting folks, to getting the 101, getting oriented, really hearing from people. We are going to stick out like sore thumbs. I think that by and large, people don't know what the Port of Seattle does. And I don't think that employees have had access to their, decision makers. And so I look forward to people, walking through the airport and being introduced and people feeling like they can approach us and tell us about their experience. We campaigned on, agreeing with stakeholders and folks in the industry to do tours of their workplaces and really get an experience through the eyes of a trucker of what it is to sit in those wait lines, to be able to pick up and drop off their loads, and partner with the longshoremen to be able to tour cranes and understand the mechanics of shore power and the way the actual rail is laid down to understand routes. There's so much to do, but I think in terms of policy priorities, priority one is going to be addressing the issues with the supply chains. It touches businesses, it touches consumers in their everyday lives. And then the other thing that I was really excited to be able to hit the ground running on is launching a pilot program at SeaTac Airport for on-site childcare for the workers. Low-hanging fruit, like offering their workers Orca cards so that they can use mass transit instead of driving to work every day. There's no shortage of opportunity to make meaningful changes on some of the things that we ran on. So I'm really excited about it.
How about you, Hamdi?
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting moment. There's definitely sort of a lot of challenges with the supply chain right now. I think that's the thing that actually helped towards the end of our race to get people to pay attention to what was happening at the port. And I think with the supply chain issue, it also underscored a lot of existing challenges that the maritime industry has been facing, like the labor shortage crisis. And I'm looking forward to figuring out ways that we can invest in specialized schools to prepare our youth to enter the workforce and address some of the labor shortage issues that we are seeing. That is no small task. Maritime workforce development is going to take a lot of work and big planning and big vision, but being able to get there and to be able to roll up my sleeve and start engaging in those conversations is going to be really exciting for me. Also around economic development, there's so many of our small businesses who are looking forward to port contracts and just better understanding how the port works and what are the resources available to them, and helping address that is going to be exciting for me, as well as some of the businesses that currently do have contracts with the port, figuring out how we can support them during this pandemic. I'm looking forward to engaging in those conversations and figuring out ways to help. The infrastructure bill too. I mean, we got $8 billion coming to our region, right? This is the moment to really think big. There's about $2 billion that's supposed to go towards shoreside power for cargo ships, as well as dollars. I think it was like 200 million that's supposed to come to SeaTac Airport, and some discretionary dollars that we can still push for. And so I think Toshiko and I will be both strong advocates to get as much dollars and benefits out of that infrastructure bill to support the port industries. And so I look forward to all of that, and hitting the ground running is the way that I'm looking forward to being port commissioner.
The election of both you really did restore my faith in the system. Because, things look so bleak, but the fact that you guys stepped up and were elected by a decent margin just restored my faith in the system, especially in this region. So thank you so much for running and inspiring so many people with your stories.
Hamdi Mohamed, Toshiko Hasegawa, thank you so much for being las más chingonas. And if you know what that means, that's the Spanish version for saying badass women, so yeah. So congratulations. And you made some history. Now go make more. And we appreciate you taking the time to tell us about the campaign and how it all came about, that you were able to get these positions in the Port of Seattle, which I think is a very important institution in this region. Sure is economically. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.